Welcome to the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast with Robert Glasscock. I'm Thomas Miller. Get your notepad out. You're getting ready to hear a good one. I'm just telling you. I know what's in this episode now because we just finished recording it, and it's going to be good. Do you want a technique? Well, we have a listener question that is going to really lock in a technique we've talked about in the past, but this is excellent. And you will want to go to the show notes because a link to my chart and Robert's chart are in there, and you'll need that as this episode unfolds. Here's our question from Julie.
Thank you so much for that recent Old Soul, New Soul podcast about the Midheaven technique, moving the Midheaven in your chart and counting the degrees. Revelatory. I'm definitely going to be going back, looking at my natal chart and doing the same thing and figuring some things out. But I did have a question. Can you do the same technique for any planet in your chart? Moving it and counting degrees, so how long it takes to get to the next planet, if it's in opposition to another planet, or if it's square another planet, how many degrees that takes. I want to know if you can do that with every single planet in your chart. So if you can answer that question, that would be amazing. And I just want to say a big thank you for all of the efforts that you do for the collective. You're having such a great impact, I think, on many people's lives. So I, for one, am most appreciative and thank you.
I love the way Julie thinks. I hope every astrologer thinks this way. Thomas, you've been in some of my classes and workshops, and you know that one of my mantras when you look at a horoscope is, quote unquote, make something out of everything you see. And that includes what Julie just hit on. Symbolically moving each planet forward and backward at 1 degree per year, symbolically, to make aspects. Absolutely valid. Now, I don't want Julie or anybody else to get confused with moving the midheaven to rectify a chart and moving the planets symbolically. It looks like the same techniques, but the reason that you use the midheaven in rectification is because that point is determined. It will change 1 degree every 4 minutes of birth time. And what you're trying to do in rectification is get to as close to a precise birth time as you can. So when you move the midheaven back and forth in the zodiac to form aspects with the birth planets at different ages, using 1 degree for an age, the goal of that technique is to get to a birth time, and you may have to adjust the midheaven. I just had to do this the other day, although it worked out. I asked her, a client, I said, did your family move? In fact, several times, but especially at age 4, at least 2 moves around age 4. She had her midheaven, I think, in Gemini and something. But she said, yes, we did it. So I didn't have to go any further. And she was a knowledgeable enough astrologer to know how we were doing, using the midheaven to rectify. So she understood the technique of it. But I explained to her, if you had been 5 or 6 when that move happened, or those 2 moves, then we would have changed or adjusted the midheaven by, say, 1 or 2 degrees. And then using that revised midheaven, we'd have gone on to move it to make aspects to see if we did get a pretty exact correlation. But yes, this notion of moving the planets symbolically, absolutely. One thing you can do is to remember an horary technique. In horary astrology, the planets are not allowed to leave the signs they are in to form aspects. So when you're doing this technique that Julie's just beginning to explore, that's why I love how her mind is working. You just simply look and see, if I leave this planet in the sign that it's in at birth, what aspects does it make? What aspects coming up does it make? If I move it forward in the zodiac, what aspects does it make if I move it backward in the zodiac? So yes, I thank you, Julie. That's the kind of astrology mind we need more of.
Now, one thing that you mentioned is when you get an aspect, so if you're moving a planet around, let's say you're moving Mars and looking for maybe an injury to the head, and you get it, and it's at age whatever, or X number of degrees apart, you don't need to keep milking it, right? Once you get an aspect, that's the answer. You're good to go.
That really is, Thomas, and good point. Is for example, when you're using the midheaven, moving it back and forth to rectify a chart, as I was telling this client the other day, once you hit on one, the first question I asked her, and this is what you want. The very first question I said, you've moved a lot in your life. In fact, starting early, and it looks like around age 4, did your family move either twice that year, or was there oh yes? And she started getting into her background, you see, and it was very important, this very early archetype of financial hardships forcing us to move. That's built into her DNA because it was a very early aspect. So yes, it's invaluable information, really. But that's the midheaven with the planets. I love doing it because you can look and see. For example, I am born with let's see, I've got a sun square Saturn at which matured. Now, you can do this with aspects too, Julie. I have my sun square Saturn by 2 degrees. So basically, every 2 years of my life, my natal sun square Saturn archetype is active or initiated again. So it becomes built into my DNA. It's every 2 years. So my life is sun square Saturn, that just involving those two planets. At the same time, I have Venus trine my Saturn in my 10th house. Now, Saturn is my chart ruler. It rules my ascendant, Julie, Capricorn. So I have Venus trine that Saturn. Wonderful aspect to have. Well, Venus is at 4 degrees in my chart. Saturn's at 10 degrees, 6-degree difference. So every 6 years of my life, my Venus trine Saturn natal configuration will be active, predominant in my life that year, every 6 years. And I can go back and see that. So you just see how I'm encouraging you to think.
Okay, you just mentioned now that your Sun and Saturn are 2 degrees apart. Saturn's at 10, Sun's at 8, all right? So we've got that context. I've got a Saturn aspect in my chart. I have one too. And mine is 1 degree apart. And my Saturn, which also sits in the same 7th house as yours, is just 1 degree away square from the nodes of the moon. So how do we look at that?
Again, make something out of everything you see. In other words, symbolically, your square there is 1 year apart. So basically, it means that square archetype, everything it means, the nodes and Mars, was it?
The nodes of the moon and Saturn.
And Saturn. Okay. So that square, which is really important in your life, is basically active every year of your life. And this will be true for any aspects that are only 1 degree apart from being partile or exact in your chart. So they're built into your DNA. That's why they're so powerful, if you will, and definitive. And Thomas, if you think of the nodes in your case as being associations, groups, the collective, and Saturn being your career, this is why I encourage astrologers to think you've got basically a T-square there. And a lot of the old books make a T-square bad. It isn't. I have it too. And one of the things it does make you is ambitious if you're smart, if you're conscious, because it inherently is frustrated with the status quo of the collective. The collective being the nodal archetypes, that axis in your chart, society out there, or just your community if you're local, or if you're a tribesman in the jungle. It still is your society, and your sense of order and structure and expertise and wisdom, Saturn, is square that nodal axis. So you came in to be frustrated in a divine discontent way with what you saw around you, to see if you would lead your own and structure your own life, or you would try to conform with what the group expected of you through those nodes. And that becomes true every year of your life because it's 1 degree apart. So what it means is if you're smart, like you have been, you evolve to a career that involves changing the status quo in the collective through your accrued wisdom. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
That's the ideal.
You just scripted my life, Robert.
On the negative side, it can be issues having to do with control. And the control ultimately, of course, becomes Saturnian, which in your case means, and you've got it in its home sign in Capricorn. So, of course, you would learn this lesson. But it becomes becoming the wise old man archetype, if you will. But this was going back to your birth, Thomas. You were born a wise old man, in a sense. And I think just what I know about your background with your strong religious background, that kind of Saturnian authority would be the prime area of challenge involving this Saturn in a T-square with the nodes, with the associations around you. And that becomes the sort of motivating or divine conflict in your life, is to learn through real experience, Saturn. That includes hardships, hurts, disappointments, all of those things. Learning through those, wisdom. And you found it in metaphysics, for example, and broadcasting, spreading the word about your own experiences with these areas, which is an invaluable thing to do because you're reaching, frankly, millions of people.
This question is probably more for the people who have these tighter aspects like you do and I do. So are we saying that if something is within 1 degree, so in other words, within those 60 minutes of 1 degree, that's with you every year?
Yes, sir.
And then if we are 1 degree 1 minute up to 2 degrees, that would be every, 2 years? Because we've got a little bit of extra time here, I thought, well, let's drill down on this. So what are we looking at on these in-between degrees?
You can get really too preoccupied with the forests for the trees. If it's 1 degree apart or 1 degree in 5 minutes, in the scheme of things, how does that matter? If it's 2 degrees, I was just talking about my Venus trine Saturn, 4 degrees apart. Well, fine. All I have to know as an astrologer is every 4 years I'm under that archetype, that Venus trine Saturn, and Venus is in my 10th house of career. I've always loved my career, and same with you. So, but every 4 years that Venus is trine Saturn, and it becomes built into my sense memory and even my biochemical and electromagnetic fields. They become used to that rhythm.
I want to ask you this while you're on that point, because this just came to mind as you said something, and hopefully people are looking at these charts in the on the links. So you said every 4 years that's triggered, and yet that separation between Venus and Saturn is 6. I want to just be clear on that.
So you're right. Maybe you're absolutely right. Thank you. I don't know why I'm losing my mind. Venus is at 4 degrees, Scorpio, and it is 6 degrees apart. Thank you for correcting me. It's every 6 years. So here we go again. So look at the difference when what you're asking. All right, is it really crucial to me? Well, it's not crucial, but it's important for me to be correct about this. It's every 6 years I am under that Venus trine Saturn aspect. All right, so you can do multiples of 6. 6 times 2, age 12, age 18, age 24, et cetera, et cetera. So it begins to get built into my expectations of life unconsciously that every 6 years I'm likely to have a career opportunity or advancement, or every 6 years to have an opportunity to fall in love seriously with somebody. Are you kidding me? Every 6 years? Well, just about, yeah. So it's it's this idea that there's so much in the birth chart right there already for you to look at and make something out of everything that you've seen.
Okay, so let's go back to your chart then. One other aspect, because I really would like to lock this in. So go to the show notes, pull up Robert's chart, and look at the bottom. You'll see the moon in Aries at 3 degrees, and then up at the top in the 10th house, Mars is at 22 degrees. So walk us through that, because I just want everybody to get a spread of, we just talked about tight aspects, now we're widening out.
And we're still spinning off of Julie's notion, her revelation, that you can move these planets symbolically to form aspects and do 1 degree for a year and see what you get. For example, here, if you take my moon at 3 degrees Aries, you can move it forward through Aries and see, well, at some point, it's going to move into this fourth house and oppose Mars in Libra in the 10th. And that's going to be a moon-Mars opposition at age 19. So what would you expect, any astrologer? First of all, it's a move because it's in the 4th to the 10th house. It has to do with his career. It has to do with his mind and mentality. He is setting off, moon in Aries, on a new adventure, mentally and probably physically. And then it has to involve the house matters ruled by the moon and Mars, which in this case are the 7th house, true, in my case, and also the 4th house, true. I did. That's the year I dropped out of Vanderbilt. I moved to Little Rock for, I think, about 6 months to go to the University of Arkansas, Little Rock, just for one semester, because I could not get into the Pasadena Playhouse in California until that summer. So I had to do something. So I moved twice that year, 19 and 20.
Okay,
That's how this works.
I have a question, because you're keeping the moon in the same sign, like you talked about.
Well, I'm just forming an aspect. I'm just making, we could have done anything. We could have moved the moon back 1 degree and opposed Neptune and gotten an event out of that too. But all I'm doing is just forming aspects by moving these planets like Julie was talking about. So when you do that, you can see that, well, gee, if I move this moon forward, it's going to oppose this Mars and this midheaven and then this Venus at certain ages.
Well, you've got a lot of goodies there. You could move it to the sun.
Oh, that we all have a lot of goodies.
And you could move it, wonderful, as you said, to Neptune, and you're staying all within the sign there.
And that's staying within the sign. There's no reason you can't leave the sign, but I really prefer to start anyway by keeping the planets in the sign they're in. But yeah, so look at this. I mean, I nearly, apparently, I was told this, nearly died. I got into some, I think it was rat poison under the sink or something at age 2. And there you have it. The moon opposite Neptune, poison.
Exactly.
Which, of course, I do not remember. But what's also interesting about that is that my first memory, and I mean, if you've heard me, stop me, but it's so strange because I can remember, Thomas, the day that my sister was born. I can remember we went down, my dad and I drove to the hospital in Camden, Arkansas to meet her. That was the day that when he brought the baby in for the first time, he had the nurse take it back to make sure they had brought him the right baby because that baby was too dark. Well, it was the right baby. And remember this reincarnational thing that I had anyway. But that's my first memory. Well, I was 2.5 when she was born, but I have a memory, and it's totally personal. No one could have told me this, but I vividly remember it. And it was before she was born, and it was Christmas because I was sitting alone. So I had to be, she was born in July. So I was 2.5 when I had to be two. And I was sitting in this little wooden rocker by a wall heater in this apartment that we lived in a ground floor apartment in Bearden, Arkansas, with the Christmas tree up and the lights were on. And it was kind of dusk, and I was alone and very happy, just fine, alone. And I could hear my parents coming up the sidewalk outside, and they were giggling or laughing or something. And I remember them coming in, and I thought they would come in the front door. They came in the front door, and they were different. They weren't bad. They were just different. They were happy, and they were different. And I realized later that they had been next door having a drink or two with the neighbors, and that they had left a 2-year-old infant alone in a rocking chair. I wasn't scared in the memory, but it's a definite memory. You know, no one could have told me that. So my first earliest memory has to do with alcohol. Interesting. To me.
Yeah, it is. Hey, I would like, in just the last couple of minutes we have here, for us to hear how you would move it out of a sign. So let's stay with the moon at 3 degrees Aries, but now move it over to oppose Venus at 4 degrees Scorpio.
Well, you can do that. If you did that, you would be moving it. If you moved it 30 degrees, it would be at 33 degrees Taurus. If you moved the moon at 3 Aries, moved it forward 30 degrees, that would put it at 3 degrees Taurus. Well, it still has 1 more degree to go to oppose Venus, so that would be age 31. And what would you expect? It's 4th house and 10th house again. You would expect yet another move. For starters, probably into much better conditions, living conditions. You expect a career advancement of some kind. I'm trying to think back to what was going on when I was 31. I know I was working for American Astrology magazine because I was with them for about 10 years publishing. 31, I'm trying to think.
You could even consider moving into or out of a relationship, I would imagine. Or moving for a relationship.
Which we really don't want to talk about. Yes, absolutely. That's absolutely right.
Okay, folks, sorry, we got to
go. Funny how he forgets. Funny how he forgets.
Well, you see how we did it, and that was the important thing that I wanted to bring up there. So yeah, you can, Julie, move them all over the board to come up with these kinds of things. Robert, thank you very much for this information. Great stuff there. Wow, you guys are getting so many valuable techniques in this series. They just keep coming because Robert is loaded with them from his years of astrological practice. If you'd like to consult with him, well, we've got that in the show notes as well. And our YouTube channel is just really going and blowing now. Thanks to all of you subscribing to that. We appreciate it. We're putting all kinds of little shorts on YouTube and TikTok. We've got the Discord going. We have our Trends 2023 book club going. You can go to funastrologybookclub.com for information on that. We've got a lot going on with the podcasts and a lot more to come. All the planets are direct motion right now. Jupiter is getting ready to move into Taurus in a few months. We are rolling. We got our eye on it and are following the astrology. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you back next time on Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast with Robert Glasscock.